slave trade, the lost shipwrecks of the transatlantic slave trade. The name of this documentary is Enslaved. You may have seen articles about it. I posted articles about it on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And it features Samuel L. Jackson. He narrates it, and he's featured in the documentary as well. So we're going to talk some about this documentary, Enslaved. It airs in 5 parts starting Monday, May 14th, 2020. And it airs on the cable channel Epix, EPIX. Epix is the same cable. It's the same cable channel that aired the Godfather of Harlem series starring Samuel L. Jackson as Bumpy Johnson, and you've heard me talk about that as well. Speaking of documentaries, there was a documentary that came on Sunday night on MSNBC. I read an article about this from the Washington Post, and I heard about this in some other news sources. But the name of this documentary was called Sit-In, or The Sit-In, and The Sit-In. And this documentary deals with a week in February of 1968. A week in February 1968, when Harry Belafonte sat in on the Tonight Show for Johnny Carson. Okay. And this was for an entire week. This was probably the blackest week in television history up until that point in time. All right. Because the guests he had on, it was a 2-hour documentary on MSNBC, aired Sunday, September 12th, 2020 on MSNBC. It's executive produced by Joy-Ann Reid, who's on MSNBC. And he had everybody on from Aretha Franklin to Dionne Warwick to John Lewis to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He brought the civil rights movement into the living rooms of millions of white people all across the country. African Americans, of course, but millions of white people all across the country. He had Nipsey Russell on, not Nipsey Hussle, Nipsey Russell. He had Nipsey Russell on, all these African American celebrities, and he had white celebrities, Petula Clark. There was a number of them. He had Senator John Kennedy on, brother of John F. Kennedy. And this was a monumental achievement. So we're going to talk some about the Sit-In documentary and it recounting the week in 1968 when Harry Belafonte took Johnny Carson's place on TV. This was probably the blackest week in TV history. Okay. And the sad thing about this is that back at that time on NBC, so the Tonight Show, NBC. So millennials and Generation Z. All right. Johnny Carson hosted the Tonight Show before Jay Leno. Just for those that don't know, okay, because I mean, sometimes we deal with generational challenges. Okay, Google Johnny Carson if you don't know who Johnny Carson is. Okay, not Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon took over from Jay Leno. Jay Leno took over from Johnny Carson. Okay, Johnny Carson took over from Steve Allen, who originally hosted it when it was in black and white. Okay, just to give some historical background on this. All right. So this was the first time we saw an African-American man on 5 nights a week on late night television like this. All right. 1968. This was 2 months before Dr. King was assassinated. He was assassinated April 4th, 1968. This was in February 1968. Okay. So they had him on during Black History Month, but this is when Black History Month was still a week. All right. Didn't become a month nationally to 1976. This is 68. It's still a week at this point in time. Joe Biden was in Detroit this past Wednesday. We see poll after poll after poll. It shows in general Joe Biden leading, especially nationally. We see Joe Biden leading in 4 recent polls that just came out dealing with swing states. New York Times has an article, Trump onslaught against Biden falls short of a breakthrough. And You know, we've been talking about Joe Biden's plan for Black America, his 22-page, quote unquote, Black agenda. It came out originally May 2020. It's broken into 6 parts. Pages 2 through 11 deal with economic empowerment. For those people who talk about economic empowerment, it's in there. Back during May and June of 2020, I spent 6 weeks on this show. Each week, we broke down one part of his agenda, his 22-page agenda to empower Black America. I said after he got the nomination, after he accepted the nomination, I will go back through again, and we're going to do another 6-part series to break it down for those who missed it, don't know it existed, etc. Okay. This week is part 4. We'll deal with voting rights, equal protection, and HR 40. Voting rights, equal protection, and HR 40. We'll deal with part 4 of his agenda to empower Black America. Also, there was an article I saw from CNN.com that deals with 13 mummies that have been found in Egypt. We'll talk a little bit about that. Trump caught on tape downplaying coronavirus dangers. Trump lied and people died. It is what it is. Hey, it could have been 2 million people. It's only 193,000. What are you crying about? Also, you remember Charlottesville, Virginia, August 2017? Remember the race riot that took place there? You remember the Unite the Right rally, the white supremacists? A lot of them probably Donald Trump supporters, but not all of them, you know, because there were good people on both sides. Charlottesville removes Confederate statue near site of deadly 2017 rally. TheHill.com has reporting on that. So we'll discuss that a little bit also. Now, I have a ton of articles to deal with. I have a ton of information. Biggest challenge in doing this show is not finding content, it's trying to reduce how much content I want to talk about. Okay, because I don't want to do 2 hours of doom and gloom. I don't want to do 2 hours of police shootings, and there's enough to talk about. YahooNews.com has an article. Police are still killing Black people at disproportionate rates. Police are still killing Black people at disproportionate rates. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd died after a Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck for more than 8 minutes, 46 seconds. The incident sparked international protests against racism and police brutality. But in the wake of this mass call for change, police are still killing Black men and women at a disproportionate rate. Over the following 3 months, from May 26 to August 31st, 2020, police in the U.S. killed 288 people, according to the data from the Washington Post and Mapping Police Violence, 2 organizations that kept comprehensive list of people who have been killed by police. We'll talk a little bit about this, right? I don't want, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I was explaining how I read articles every day dealing with police shootings, things like this, right? I don't talk about all those on the show because 1, I don't want this to be a depressing show. 2, it's depressing for me to talk about it. And I've read a lot more articles than the ones I talk about here on this show. Okay, so we'll deal with a little bit about that. How much time we have before the break, JT? 3 minutes. All right. Okay, so the call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Now on the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the comforts of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events, history, politics, economic empowerment, education, entrepreneurship, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Sign up for our email newsletter there as well. And all of my DVD lectures are there also, articles that I've written. We have a ton of information there for you. You can listen to audio podcasts of this show and our broadcast also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We're also on Stitcher, iTunes, CastBox, Acast, FM Player, TuneIn, wherever you get your audio podcast from, search for the African History Network show. All right. Also, if you want to donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, and also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. All right. So we're coming up here on a break. When we come back, we'll talk some about Colin Kaepernick, and then we'll talk about this documentary featuring Samuel L. Jackson entitled Enslaved, Uncovering the Lost Shipwrecks of the Transatlantic Slave Trade. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the future of radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Are you behind on paying bills? Can't sleep? All
right, everybody, stand by.
You may want to file bankruptcy. Bankruptcy will stop those harassing creditor calls, stop garnishment.
Well, commercial break here. If you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com.
When bankruptcy can make you debt-free
to
in 100
advertise with the African History Network.
Bundy Legal Services a call.
Current promotion, buy 1 month, get 2 months free. How's everybody doing?
To schedule an appointment.
Share this broadcast on your social media platforms.
Central Park Deli on Losser between 8 and 9 Mile Road is serving everything fresh and delicious. Open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Park Deli will deliver to businesses from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily. At Central Park Deli, you will enjoy our hefty sandwiches, our delicious soups made fresh daily, our fresh made-to-order stir-fry dinners, and the best roll-up sandwiches in town in a variety of meats, such as club, buffalo chicken, Italian, Greek, hot corned beef, veggie roll-ups, and more. Central Park Deli offers a great dining experience, fast and efficient carry and fantastic tray catering for special events. Here. Central Park Deli makes ordering your food in advance fast and easy with our new online platform and mobile app. Central Park Deli on Losser between 8 and 9 Mile Road is serving everything fresh and delicious.
Hi,
stand by, everybody, on
Butler,
commercial break.
Deputy Director for Infectious Diseases at CDC. I'd like to talk to you about the new virus that causes the disease COVID-19.
All right, you've heard me talk about the documentary Hapi, dealing with the role of economic development in African civilization. Are you ready for a new black economy? Well, Hapi is a brand new documentary that will set you on a path of knowledge and enlightenment. The film Hapi gives viewers a snapshot of our economic history from the dawn of civilization right up until today. Hapi brings together the brightest and most prolific minds in the fields of psychology, history, business, and politics. Visit the website hapifilm.com for more information. Use the code HAPI, HAPI-AHN for a 10% discount. HAPI, HAPI, AHN for a 10% discount. All right, stand by, everybody. We'll be back from break in just a minute here. Damn. Stand by. Stand by, everybody. Okay, how's everybody doing? We've got TJ, Clarence, Alfred watching on Facebook. Okay, the film Hapi from director Taki Grant, The Role of Economic Development in African Civilization, is available right now at hapifilm.com. Hapifilm.com. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the future radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Sunday, September 13th, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. And follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and on my YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, as well. All right, calling numbers 313-778-7600 if you have a question or comment. All right, so NFL season has started. I was seeing some information here from the Washington Post. And Washington Post has updates on what's going on. And they talk about some of the protests that were taking place, different types of protests. Players protest quietly, with some skipping the national anthem. The message was everywhere across the NFL on the first Sunday of the season, delivering a plea for social justice and racial equality that was granular, from player shirts to their helmets, as well as overarching as it extended to the end zones and to lift every voice and sing. That's the Black National Anthem. For some people that don't know that, because there's some people that don't know there's a Black National Anthem. It's Lift Every Voice and Sing, okay? Written by James Weldon Johnson in 1899. The Lift Every Voice and Sing will be, it's the song that will be played along with the national anthem before every game. Now, some players like the Cleveland Browns chose to remain in the locker room during the playing of the national anthem in Baltimore, where the Baltimore Ravens players either stood, knelt, or sat on the bench. Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti said in a written statement, "We respect and support our players' right to protest peacefully. This was not a protest against our country, the military, or the flag. Our players remain dedicated to uplifting their communities and making America better. They have proven this through substantive action. They are committed to using their platform to drive positive change, and we support their efforts," end quote. Now, in the late afternoon games, the Arizona Cardinals remained in the locker room during the national anthem, while the 49ers were on the field. San Francisco 49ers were on the field with wide receiver Richie James and running back Jerick McKinnon sitting as the song was played. Now, you watch this show, you listen to me, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, and pretty soon we'll be broadcasting on my Instagram page. I'm not a big fan of Instagram, but I have some followers on Instagram. So I said, okay, so we should broadcast on Instagram. It's Michael M. Hotep on Instagram. To me, Instagram is a waste of time, but okay. I call it the white national anthem because that's what it is. Who wrote it? A white man, Francis Scott Key, September 13th, 1840. Who did he write it for? White people. Who did he write it about? White people. Who voted on it in Congress to make it the national anthem? White people. I mean, if you read it, it's the white national anthem. It was not intended for African Americans. Now, some people talk about the third stanza, no refuge for the hireling or the slave. And they say, well, it's a problem because of the third stanza. No, it's the entire song and who wrote it. Francis Scott Key was a white supremacist slave owner from Maryland who used his position as a U.S. district attorney to fight against abolitionists, who were trying to free enslaved Africans. He thought African people were inferior. So this is, when you study the history of it, you have to ask the question. See, there needs to be a new national anthem. Okay, there needs to be a new national anthem. If we are going to have the type of America that the majority of us say we want, then you have to have a new national anthem that's inclusive of the people of America, because that one is not. It was written during the War of 1812. War of 1812 was 1812 to 1814, if I remember correctly. It was the War of 1812. And it was originally called the Battle of Fort McHenry. The Battle of Fort McHenry. They're in Baltimore. And when you studied the War of 1812, you had 6,000 enslaved Africans who ran from the U.S. side over to the British side, because the British said, if you come fight for us, we'll set you free. When the War of 1812 ended, the U.S. had the audacity to demand that Great Britain return their runaway slaves back. So when you study, and I've done the entire presentation dealing with the history of the national anthem, the white national anthem, and Colin Kaepernick's protests, all that stuff. Go research that. Francis Scott Key. Now, the question we had to ask ourselves is, why are you playing this at an NFL game in the first place? This is not Army versus Navy. Why are you playing this at an NFL game in the first place? If we really want to, ask questions about this. Then the people who say the NFL players should stand for the national anthem, when you watch the NFL game in your living room, you stand for the national anthem when it plays, or you just want black people to stand for it? When you at a sports bar and the national anthem comes on, do you stand for the national anthem then, or you just want black people to stand for it? Because the NFL is 70% African American. So when I hear people make these arguments, I just have to, somebody who's a historian, I'm saying, what are you talking about? So let's continue with this article here. So in New Orleans, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and New Orleans Saints players stood on the sidelines with Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive back standing together with arms locked. In the early games, the Indianapolis Colts all stood for the national anthem, but the white national anthem. Okay. But their coach, Frank Reich, took a knee in Jacksonville, Florida. In Minneapolis, several Vikings players took a knee during the anthem, while the Green Bay Packers chose to remain in the locker room. All right. Now, it wasn't until about 2009 that the players, before 2009, the players didn't even come out of the locker room during the national anthem. So you have to, I'm going to try to pull up this article here from Washington Post, because I've done a lot of research on this. I did about a 3-hour lecture in 2016, I think it was 17, dealing with this in the national anthem and why the players came out, right? Let me see if we can pull up this article here. We may have to come back to it, but the reason why they had the players come out during the national anthem is because the NFL thought it'd be good for public relations. Really, this is what it was. They thought it'd be good for public relations. Now, what a lot of people did not know is that the Department of Defense was paying sports teams and sports leagues for patriotic displays. This is what a lot of people didn't know. Now, this was exposed. This is not conspiracy theory, people, because you know me, I don't deal with conspiracy theories. Okay. I don't deal with it, because conspiracies do happen, like counterintelligence program, August 1967. But a lot of this stuff, people just make a living promoting conspiracy theories, all that stuff. I deal with facts and evidence. Proper documentation ends all conversation. Read this article from the Washington Post. Report: at least 50 teams were paid by Department of Defense for patriotic displays. At least 50 teams were paid by Department of Defense for patriotic displays. This is from November 4th, 2015, written by Cindy Brown. Read this article. If you've been watching my broadcast going back 2015, 2016, you've heard me talk about this. There are other news outlets that carried this story. A government oversight report released Wednesday, back in November 2015, by Senators John McCain, who has passed away since then, Senators John McCain and Senator Jeff Flake, both of Arizona, offers new details about how the Department of Defense paid professional sports teams and leagues for patriotic displays honoring American soldiers. The report expands on one that became public last May 2014, and resulted in changes to the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act of 2016, prohibiting the expenditures and calling on sports leagues and sports teams to donate the money to organizations that support the military, veterans, and their families. Okay. Senator John McCain said, what we take issue with is Senator Jeff Flake wrote, I should say, what we take issue with, who, like Senator John McCain is a Republican from Arizona, quote, is the average fan thinking teams are doing this on behalf of the military, end quote. The study was called something like Stopping Paid Patriotism. This was like a 150-page study that they released. This was in 145 page. The 145-page report cites contributions to 18 NFL teams, 10 Major League Baseball teams, eight National Basketball Association teams, 6 National Hockey League teams, 8 soccer teams, as well as NASCAR. NASCAR that just took down the Confederate battle flag, and Donald Trump came out in opposition to them taking down the Confederate battle flag, which is a flag of traitors, flag of people who committed treason based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution and took up arms against the U.S. to overthrow the government. NASCAR, Iron Dog, and Indiana University, Purdue University, and Indiana University, Purdue University. The Atlanta Falcons, for instance, were the top recipients, getting $879,000 over 4 years. Over the same period of time, for instance, the New England Patriots received $700,000 and the Buffalo Bills $650,000. The report includes a memo from the NFL to its teams giving guidance on, quote, paid patriotism, end quote, paid PAID, paid patriotism, end quote, issues. Commissioner Roger Goodell followed with a letter to the committee dated November 2nd. It had to be November 2nd, 2015, writing that the league will conduct an audit of all of its contracts with military branches and National Guard units. Quote, if we find that inappropriate payments were made, they will be refunded in full, Roger Goodell wrote. So now the Atlanta Braves, Major League Baseball, Atlanta Braves team received $450,000 over 3 years. The Atlanta Hawks NBA team received $230,000 over 2 years. The Minnesota Wild National Hockey League team received $570,000 over 3 years. Locally, the only team named in the report was DC United, which received $25,000 in the fiscal year 2014 for taxpayer-funded paid patriotism and perks. Okay, the perks included 10 tickets to one game for DC Army National Guard members. Read this article. This is dealing with the money behind the patriotic displays. So a lot of people don't know about this. Okay. Okay. NASCAR was the biggest recipient, getting $1.5 million for fiscal year 2015. Included were personal appearances by Eric Almirola, Aricalmirol, and Richard Petty, as well as 20 Richard Petty driving experience ride-alongs. The expenditures, according to the Department of Defense, were, quote, integral to its recruiting efforts, quote, end quote. A NASCAR official who requested anonymity told the Washington Post in an email, quote, NASCAR has a long-standing history of honoring America's military. Each year we recognize active duty service members and veterans at races around the country. NASCAR has not been paid by the military and would never accept military funds to recognize those who have served, end quote. Okay, read this full article here. This deals with at least 50 teams were paid by the Department of Defense for patriotic displays. This came out November 4th, 2015. Okay, so we go back to, now that's Washington Post. We go back to the Washington Post update from today dealing with the protests at the NFL games. Because you have to ask, okay, so why y'all playing national anthem here? This isn't Army versus Navy. Why is it? Why y'all doing this? So in early games on Sunday, September 13th, the Indianapolis Colts all stood for the national anthem, but their coach, Frank Reich, took a knee in Jacksonville. Let's see here. At FedEx Field, the Philadelphia Eagles were not on the field for the national anthem. The Washington football team they changed their name. The Washington football team was on the field, and all players stood for the anthem, some with their fists raised. Okay. So Colin Kaepernick came out and spoke about this. You may have seen the article I posted. dealing with what Kaepernick had to say. TheHill.com reports Kaepernick calls out NFL for social justice propaganda, while Eric Reid is still a free agent. Colin Kaepernick, who started this protest going back to August 2015, I think it was 2016. I think it was 2016. Kaepernick on Sunday accused NFL team owners of blackballing a fellow player over his advocacy for racial justice issues, even as the league engages in quote unquote propaganda regarding its actions on social justice. In a tweet on Sunday, September 13th, 2020, the former San Francisco 49ers quarterback who was being blackballed by the NFL, still being whiteballed by the NFL. That's me saying, that's not the article, that's me saying it. Still being whiteballed by the NFL, even though Roger Goodell came out and said, you know, they were wrong about Kaepernick, things like this. Nobody's called him in for a trial. You know, actions speak louder than words. Isn't that what women say in relationships? Actions speak louder than words, right? Actions speak louder than words. Put your money where your mouth is. Just say, well, that's it's, I'm gonna let that slide. But anyway, so in the tweet Sunday, the former San Francisco 49ers quarterback wrote that the league was still actively blackballing Eric Reid. Now, Eric Reid was a former safety of the San Francisco 49ers and the Carolina Panthers. Eric Reid was a teammate of Colin Kaepernick. He was the second player in the league to take a knee along with Colin Kaepernick to support Kaepernick's protests. Okay. So Kaepernick said that he wrote that the league was still actively blackballing Eric Reid, okay, while running, quote, propaganda about how they care about Black life, end quote. He posted this, was that on Twitter? He's on social media. He posted it on Twitter. He said, Kaepernick said, while the NFL runs propaganda about how they care about Black life, they are still actively blackballing Eric Reid for fighting for the Black community. Eric set 2 franchise records last year and is one of the best defensive players in the league. Okay, Kaepernick wrote on Sunday. Now, Kaepernick has leveled similar accusations at NFL team owners regarding his own lack of employment with the NFL following the 49ers decision to cut him from the team in 2017. However, he has faced criticism from some who argue that his status as a free agent is linked to his performance rather than his advocacy on and off the field against police brutality and racism. Now, Eric Reid was the second player behind Colin Kaepernick to participate in kneeling protests during performances of the national anthem before NFL games. He has since argued in court that his own free agency status is a result of collusion between NFL team owners to avoid signing him, influenced by criticism of the protests from Donald Trump, et cetera. Okay, so Eric Reid was picked up by the Carolina Panthers, but then something strange happened. He basically was submitted, at least that first season that he played for the Carolina Panthers, he was submitted to more random drug testing like basically anybody else in the league. Okay, so this is what's taking place right now. So on the one hand, you have the NFL putting forward this social media, putting forth this social justice face, and they're playing the Black national anthem, and the players are linking arms, and they're saying, okay, the players can protest now, etc. Right? On the other hand, Kaepernick still hasn't even been asked for a tryout, not this season. 1, 2, Eric Reid is still a free agent. So you have to ask the question, why? Okay. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. I know New York Times I posted an article from the New York Times today, also dealing with NFL kicks off season with nods to unrest and focus on anthem. All right. So we'll see what real change comes from this. I think it's better in the NFL now than it was 4 years ago. But we know the Lions players locked arms, Detroit Lions players locked arms in a show of solidarity. They still lost to the Chicago Bears. I feel sorry for Lions fans. I live in Detroit. Okay, okay. I'm sorry. I can't watch a Lions game. I'm sorry. I don't have 4 hours to waste. Okay, I know I'm not supposed to say that, but but at the same time, I haven't watched the NFL games in like 4 years, since 2016. Since Kaepernick left, I ain't watched the NFL game. I'm not watching one until he either gets signed by a team or retires. So check out this article also from the New York Times as well. NFL kicks off season with nods to unrest and focus on anthem. Several teams stayed in the locker room for the pregame playing of the national anthem, while some players knelt during it or wore decals and shirts against hate and racism. Okay. So I want to see somebody come out and deal with the real history of the white national anthem. That's what I want to see. And then ask the NFL, why are you playing this song? You might as well be playing Dixie or something like that. Or was that a Zippity Doodah from Walt Disney? Why are you doing this? Okay, you listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Speaking of, you had the whole thing with the owners of the team being called team owners, and they say they're treating the players like slaves and things like this. And now there's a push to move away from using the term team owner. Okay, I forgot which term they're going to use, but speaking of slavery, Samuel L. Jackson is featured in a new documentary on the Epix channel called Enslaved. This deals with uncovering the lost shipwrecks of the transatlantic slave trade. Hey, JT, can you cue up clip number 4? That's the trailer for Enslaved. Forbes.
Did you send me a second email?
No, it's in the first email. It's like the last. It's under clip number 3.
That would be clip 3.
Should have been 3 clips in there, and it is the YouTube clip.
I don't have a YouTube clip.
It's in the lower font size. It's under clip 3.
Oh wait, no. Yeah, I have that right there.
Okay, yeah, cue that up for me, please. It's only 30 seconds, but cue that up for me. We're going to let me know when it's queued up. Okay,
it's good to go.
Okay, Forbes.com has an article dealing with this documentary, and I heard about it also in other on the news, things like this. Uncovering the lost shipwrecks of the transatlantic slave trade. For 400 years, the transatlantic slave trade tore families apart while transporting between 10 and 12 million Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas in chains. In the process, thousands of slave ships transited waters that harbor tranquil tourist destinations today. However, many ships never reached their final destinations. Some remain on the ocean floor where weather, cannonballs, or navigational errors set them to rest hundreds of years ago. For the past 2 years, Alana Vellacott, Vellacott, and Kramer Wimberly have been key cogs in a dive crew working on the Samuel L. Jackson headline project Enslaved, to locate and tell the stories of lost slave ships and the souls trapped on board. Lost slave ships and the souls trapped on board. This week, while Samuel L. Jackson makes a whirlwind tour of television appearances ahead of the series launch, Alana Vellacott and Kramer Wimberly sat down with us to share stories of the life-changing discoveries they made waiting below the water surface from the Caribbean to the United Kingdom. Let's go to the trailer of Enslaved.
More than 12 million Africans were enslaved and trapped. More than 2 million of our ancestors died at sea. The ocean-borne stories that haven't been told.
This is ground zero for the whole transatlantic slave trade.
The story of the slave trade is world history. It's not something unique to America. It was a worldwide phenomenon.
All right. So you can watch that on YouTube, and you can see some interviews with Samuel L. Jackson about this documentary. It's a 5-part series. I hope people watch it. I'm going to check it out. And this is something that now I haven't seen it. I don't know. So let me just say this from the start. I've heard some positive things about it. I haven't seen it, so I don't know whether it's good or bad. Okay. I think it's good. Okay. But you've heard me say before that America needs a massive history lesson. Okay. America needs a massive history lesson. And this is true because Americans are very ignorant of history. Now, this is not an attack on anybody, a slight on anybody, but Americans are very ignorant of history. All you have to do is look at the fact that you have people out fighting over Confederate monuments, fighting to save Confederate monuments that were erected to traitors of the Union. Okay, people who took up arms against the Union committed treason. Treason is defined by Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. All right, that's when you aid a country that is at war, that is engaged in a declared war against the U.S. Okay, or when you succeed from the Union, like they did with the Confederacy, starting with South Carolina, December 20th, 1860, seceding from the Union. And the Civil War starts at Fort Sumter in South Carolina, April 12th, 1861. And the South is trying to overthrow the government. That's treason. Contrary. Now, treason does not mean disagreeing with the president. That's not treason. Okay. Or trying to vote the president out of office or speaking out against the president. That's not treason. Just so people understand. All right. So if you go back to this article from Forbes, and we have any callers, JT?
No, we do not.
Okay. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay. And we'll post it here on Facebook. If we go back to the article from Forbes.com, they have excerpts of an interview that they did with two people involved in the film. One of the questions that was asked is, why does the world need to hear the story of these ships right now? Alana Vellacott said the timing right now is absolutely important because the Black Lives Matter wave is now a tsunami. Everyone is waking up. Everyone is participating in it. France is, Italy, Russia, China. Everyone is participating. African American and African Caribbean people need to know the things we go through were put in place to make sure we never succeeded or didn't do too well. Okay. Now I wonder if Donald Trump's going to watch this because, he did a rally just a couple of days ago and he talked about watching about 8 hours of cable news and watching all the Fox News shows. Is Donald Trump going to watch this? Because when Bob Woodward asked Donald Trump about white privilege and things like this, Donald Trump acted like white privilege didn't exist. He said, "Oh, you really drank the Kool-Aid," but you were telling people to inject Clorox bleach in themselves to fight coronavirus. Kramer Wimberly answered the question, why does the world need to hear the story of these ships right now? He said, with respect to Black Lives Matter, what it is that we are facing right now, in my opinion, is a direct result and consequence of not having come to terms and never addressing what happened with that horrible institution. We have said slavery is illegal, but we haven't done anything with respect to the generations of people who came through that system. The psychological impact that is almost in the DNA of African Americans as a result of what took place has to be addressed. The psychological impact that is almost in the DNA of African Americans as a result of what took place has to be addressed. Now, if you study epigenetics, and you've heard me talk about epigenetics before, epigenetics is a field of study that deals with how trauma alters your DNA and how you can pass on altered DNA to future generations, to your offspring. So Dr. Rachel Yehuda has done a lot of research on Jewish Holocaust survivors, okay? And she has a paper at the New England Journal of Medicine, because I read her paper there. I paid $25 to access it. And also Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, has talked about this as well. But what happened was she found, Dr. Rachel Yehuda found that Jewish Holocaust survivors had a altered DNA. The FKBP5 portion of their DNA was altered, and they had an elevated stress hormonal level. And their offspring, their children, also had altered DNA as well. And this is because of the trauma of the Jewish Holocaust. All right. Well, so the question was asked, well, African Americans, we went through 246 years of basically enslavement in this country alone. Okay. So what happened to our DNA? Epigenetics, EPIGENETICS, epigenetics. All right. So not only that, but even though slavery has been abolished, the vestiges of slavery still remain. Those people who engaged in and believed wholeheartedly in enslaving people did not just disappear once it abolished. They owned businesses. They worked in governments. You have police officers doing the things they are doing because it was some police officers doing the things they are doing because it has been bred into the way they are taught, into the culture. You're dealing with white supremacy racism in the U.S., but you're also dealing with it inside of the culture of policing in many police departments, approximately 18,500 police departments across the country. So I'm not saying in every police department, but we see it prevalent in many police departments, and it's protected by the police unions. It's protected oftentimes by the police unions. Okay, we're coming up on a break here. We're going to continue this on the other side of the break. We're talking about the documentary Enslaved, featuring Samuel L. Jackson. This deals with uncovering the lost shipwrecks of the transatlantic slave trade. And when we come back, we'll talk about another documentary, The Sit-In, that dealt with a week in February 1968 where Harry Belafonte guest hosted The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, guest hosted for an entire week. This was the blackest week on TV up until that time. You listen to the African History Network show, 9-10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, everybody. All right, everybody, stand by. Hey, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Current promotion, buy 1 month, get 2 months free. Okay, so a lot of people want to study African history, read books, but you don't have, a lot of people want to study African history, read books, but don't have a lot of time to do it. The Blacklisted app can help you with this. Blacklisted is an app that provides insightful summaries of books pertaining to the Black experience. as Black people, we know the importance of reading books to discover our incredible contributions to world history, to uplift our self-esteem, and to empower ourselves for our relentless fight for social justice. Unfortunately, with our busy lives, it feels like there is never enough time to read a book. Fortunately, there's a solution. With Blacklisted, this app provides key insights from best-selling books about the Black experience, therefore saving you time, increasing your knowledge, and empowering yourself through inspirational and actionable items. Okay, visit their website, blacklisted.com, Black without the C, BLAK, blacklisted.com, or download the Blacklisted app from the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's Blacklisted, BLAK, Black without the C. So in times like this, a lot of people are looking for healthy products, healthy beauty products, etc. And sageandelmapothecary.com can help you with this. Now, Sage and Elm Apothecary designs over 60 different beautifully handcrafted soaps, natural toothpaste, hydrating oils, deodorants, face masks, shampoos, conditioners, and so much more. They use simple ingredients such as whole fruits, herbs, and vegetables. Visit the website sageandelmapothecary.com, APOTHECARY, sageandelmapothecary.com. You can order their products there. Also find out about their pop-up shops and vending events as well. Let them know you found out about this from the African History Network. All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media pages as well. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Let's see. And we're also on YouTube. How's everybody doing on our YouTube channel? You can donate to the African History Network as well. $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. And then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. We've got Alfred. We've got let's see who else we have here. We're broadcasting on YouTube. Shout out to everybody watching us on YouTube. We'll be back in just a minute from commercial break. Okay, who we have? Met Fury, No Ma'am, HB Me.
Detroit, 910 AM Superstation, a division of Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. Hey, it is Sunday, September 13th, 2020. We're live. Hope everybody's doing well. We got people watching on our YouTube channel. Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP, people watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Also, okay. And the call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. So give us a call. All right. So right before the break, we were talking about this new documentary that is airs. It's a 5-part series. It airs September 14th, 2020 on Epix, EPIX. It's starring Samuel L. Jackson, and it's called Enslaved. It deals with uncovering the lost shipwrecks of the transatlantic slave trade. There was a good article from Forbes.com that talks about this, and I was sharing some excerpts from it and some of the feedback from the producers involved in the film, Alana Vellicott and Kramer Wimberly. So we were talking about the psychological impact that slavery has had on African Americans and impact on our DNA. Another question was asked. Let's see here. Let's look at, just want to look at one more. A question was asked by the writer of this article. This article is written by Joe Seals. SILLS for Forbes.com. Joe Sills asked the question, why is it important to find these shipwrecks? What additional meaning can finding a shipwreck deliver to the pages of a history book? What additional meaning can finding a shipwreck deliver that the pages of a history book cannot? Now, once again, you've heard me talk about this before. I said this before the break. It's important to understand Americans are very, very ignorant of history. Okay. So it is not an attack on somebody, because some people say, oh, I don't like it when you say that. No, I speak across the country. I'm trying to tell you, I'm not just talking about African Americans. I'm talking about white people also. And it's because of the curriculum in the schools and what's not being taught in schools across the country. This is why the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Teaching Hard History American Slavery, is so important. Teaching Hard History American Slavery, because it documents how the history of slavery is being incorrectly taught in schools all across the country. And it deals with, it gives real recommendations on how to better teach the history of slavery and more accurately teach the history of slavery. So I encourage everybody. You have a lot of parents who are involved in educating their children at home, whether the parents are now working from home because of COVID-19, and they're being part-time teacher and part-time employee, and they're trying to get their children to be motivated sitting on Zoom all day or what have you, right? But this is something that schools all across the country should use. And parents, download this from splcenter.org, splcenter.org, which is the Southern Poverty Law Center's website. Search for Teaching Hard History American Slavery, Teaching Hard History American Slavery. If your school is not using this, if your teachers, your child's teacher does not know about this, that's not good. Okay. It's called Teaching Hard History American Slavery. It's about a 52-page study. On the advisory board that helped put this together was Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries. Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who's a nephew of Dr. Leonard Jeffries. He is a history professor at Ohio State University. You heard me interview him a couple of months ago here on the African History Network show. So download this, and this can help you out a lot. All right. But one of the, so back to the question, why is it important to find these shipwrecks? What additional meaning can finding a shipwreck deliver that the pages of a history book cannot? Alana Velicott said, the first time I joined the crew, we went to Cornwall, England, the exact place my dad is from. Now, my dad is British. My mom is Bahamian, from the Bahamas, Bahamian. I am biracial. We went to the town that my last name is from, and I had never been there. So I actually met that side of my family for the first time. I was able to hug them and touch them, to look at their noses and eyes and ask, do I have those ears and that smile? Do you have the same crooked teeth as me? Now, that part of me became real because I was looking at it. In that same vein, diving those shipwrecks and seeing artifacts, whether they are brought to the surface or not, makes history real. Diving those shipwrecks and seeing artifacts, whether they are brought to the surface or not, makes history real. I think it's sort of the difference between having your grandfather's pocket watch in your pocket as opposed to just stories about your grandfather's pocket watch. It makes your ancestors, your history, real and tangible. Real and tangible. I can look on the seafloor of the ocean, the seafloor, and see coins that were worth 15 African slaves. I can see that it really happened. It gives me power and hope and closure to look back and see tangible evidence of the atrocities that were happening to our race and our family members. Now, Kramer Wimberly answered the question and said, I am a former investigator. For me, those locations are crime scenes. Those locations are crime scenes. A crime was committed there, not just a kidnapping, but torture and crimes against humanity. And a lot of Africans were, when they were captured, it violated the existing treaties at the time, like the Anglo-Spanish Treaty about 1837 and around 1817. So when you look at the slave ship, the Amistad, 1839, and those Africans were captured in Sierra Leone. We look at the Amistad slave ship. When those Africans were captured, it violating the existing treaties. One, and two, when that ship came into U.S. waters, it violated federal law at the time, because the U.S. Congress outlawed the international transatlantic slave trade March 2nd, 1807. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. I've done some Facebook Live presentations dealing with this. March 2nd, 1807, the U.S. Congress outlawed the international transatlantic slave trade. The law went into effect January 1st, 1808. Listen to me. It went into effect January 1st, 1808. So all of those slave ships that came into this country from January 1st, 1808 up until about June of 1860, when the Clotilda comes into Alabama, and the Clotilda is the last known slave ship to come into this country. That's 1860. That's the year before the Civil War starts. All those Africans that came in, they were contraband. It was illegal based upon federal law, but white people kept violating federal law. There are documented cases of white men who were caught transporting Africans illegally. They were prosecuted. Some of them did some light prison sentences or something like that. So when the Amistad slave ship comes in 1839, it's seized by the U.S. It's seized by the U.S. military, because you had abolitionist ships watching the waterways, but you also had U.S. Military, Navy, things like this, watching for slave ships because it was illegal. Why was that law passed by Congress March 2nd, 1807? Well, it goes back to the Philadelphia Convention, 1787, when they're drafting the U.S. Constitution and debating the U.S. Constitution. Because at the Philadelphia Convention, all of the colonies had agreed to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade. That means the importing of Africans into this country, to enslave them. Now, you could still have African slaves inside the country and auction them off and have plantations, but it's talking about bringing Africans into the country as slaves, capturing them and bringing them to the country. That was illegal. So at the Philadelphia Convention, spring of 1787, they're debating this. And all the colonies agreed to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade except South Carolina. Now, at one point, South Carolina had abolished it, then they brought it back. You had people like Thomas Jefferson, who wanted to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade because he was a big time slave owner. And he felt that it would increase the value of the African slaves that were already here. You also had some that were who feared overpopulation of African slaves. And they said, look, we have enough here that they can reproduce. And there's a fear of too many coming in and we being outnumbered. In some of these colonies who that are going to be states. So because they can't come to an agreement, they decide to table the argument for 20 years. It's in the U.S. Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. This is why we had to read the U.S. Constitution, because I hear all these people talk about reparations. They ain't never read the Constitution. And the Constitution lays out a legal argument for reparations. But since we don't study history and law and never read the Constitution, we don't know this. Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution, you can go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, or archives.gov and read it. It basically tells you that the earliest that the international transatlantic slave trade can be outlawed is 1808. So Congress passed a law March 2nd, 1807, went into effect January 1st, 1808, because that's the earliest it could go into effect based upon the U.S. Constitution. So when you study these cases and that Amistad, and I've done a whole presentation on the Amistad, you can watch it. It's on YouTube. We'll probably re-air it again this week, but it's on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and it's on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. I've done a whole presentation dealing with the legal case of the Amistad slave ship, which was it was a 1841 U.S. Supreme Court ruling. When you go to archives.gov, they have some of the original court documents there, because I've gone there and done research. Archives.gov, which is the website of the National Archives. And when you look up the Amistad, the first thing they tell you is that when those Africans were captured in Sierra Leone, it violated all the existing treaties at the time. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that this is Joseph Q. So in the movie Amistad came out in 1997, right? A lot of people remember Joseph Q, give us free, right? And I've asked people when I do lectures, what happened to those Africans on Amistad slave ship? They said, they were set free. Yeah, they were set free, but why were they set free? Because they showed them in the movie in the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a famous Supreme Court ruling, 1841, of the Amistad slave ship. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that those Africans, one, were never slaves, two, had a right to take up arms to fight for their freedom, and three, they ruled it was illegal for them to be captured in the first place, and it was illegal for that ship to come into U.S. waters. So when we go to lawmakers to argue reparations, we should be making legal arguments for it. Legal arguments right in the U.S. Constitution. It's backed up by 1841 U.S. Supreme Court case. All those Africans that were brought in from January 1st, 1808 to June 1860, that was illegal based upon your own laws. Before that, it was legal, but all this is illegal. So, all right, I just listen to some people and say, okay. Because now maybe I shouldn't say this, but a lot of people mean well, but some of these arguments for reparations ain't gonna go nowhere. I'm telling you right now. Slavery was morally wrong. We all know that. When you go to lawmakers who write laws, you don't argue morality, you argue law. So I ask people this question, right? those listeners show, you've heard me ask this question before. How many people have actually studied the history of slavery in this country? This may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you never maybe thought about this or disagree with it or don't like it does not mean it's not true. Just means maybe you have to do some more research to understand what I'm talking about. If it was legal in this country prior to 1808 to bring in slaves, and we know it was still legal to own slaves in this country and to trade them, enslave them, things like this. Where'd you read that slaves were supposed to be paid? I've been studying history for 28 years. I never read that. The whole purpose of enslaving them was not to pay them. It was legal not to pay them. We know it was morally wrong. We know you shouldn't do it. It was morally wrong. It was reprehensible. We understand all that. But when you go to lawmakers, you don't go arguing morality. You go arguing law. So the foundation of law in this country is the U.S. Constitution. So why wouldn't we make a constitutional argument for reparations as opposed to a moral argument? I sit back and listen to some of this. Well, we on the air, so I can't say BS. I can't say what I want to say, but it's FCC regulated radio. I just listen to some of this stuff. I'm like, y'all really want reparations, or you just want to keep fighting for reparations? Let me know. If you saw the interview I did with Dr. Ray Winbush, we dealt with this. And he talks about how we've been fighting for reparations for 200 years, going back to Elizabeth Freeman in Massachusetts, about in the 1780s. This was an enslaved African woman, also known as Mum Bet, Mumbett, Mum Bet. Her real name was Elizabeth Freeman. She sued and got her freedom in Massachusetts because it's about 1780 or so. Massachusetts outlawed slavery, and they were gradually outlawing slavery, I should say, 1780. Elizabeth Freeman. Let me pull up this article. History.com has a good article dealing with this. Okay, see, this is why you have to understand history and law. It's not one or the other. It's both. Elizabeth Freeman. This is one of the most famous cases, and in the series that Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. did, and Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my teachers, calls him Dr. Henry Louis Skip the Truth Gates. You hear me call him that sometimes, because sometimes he skips over the truth. He does do some good research, though. I give it to him. I've read dozens of his articles. He used to write for theroot.com. Read this article here from history.com, official website of the History Channel. Meet Elizabeth Freeman, the first enslaved woman to sue for her freedom and win. The first enslaved woman to sue for her freedom and win. Nearly 80 years before the Dred Scott decision, a midwife used the Massachusetts Constitution to fight for her liberty. This is going back to the 1780s. Okay. In 1780, the proclamation, quote, all men are born free and equal, end quote, rang out from the central square in the small town of Sheffield in western Massachusetts. The line was from the state's newly ratified constitution, read aloud for a proud public to hear. America's war for independence was raging. This is during the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. This is 1780. Like the rest of the burgeoning country, the town was gripped by revolutionary fever. But one woman who heard it was not inspired. She was enraged. Elizabeth Freeman, then known only as Bet, B-E-T-T, was an enslaved woman who understood the irony in the Declaration right away. As she watched the men around her declare freedom from oppressive rule, it only stood to reason that she should do the same. Elizabeth Freeman marched, by some accounts, immediately to the house of Theodore Sedgwick, Sedgwick, a prominent local lawyer. How much time before the break, JT? And demanded a
wrap it up.
Okay, and demanded a dramatic accounting for the hypocrisy. She wanted to sue the state of Massachusetts for her freedom. She did that and actually won. You listen to 9:10 a.m. Superstation, the Future Radio on Michael Imhotep, the African History Network show. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. Okay, hey, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com, customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. Current promotion, buy 1 month, get 2 months free. Now, September is National Life Insurance Month, and September is Life Insurance Awareness Month, I should say. Life Insurance Awareness Month. And this is the best time right now to shop for life insurance. There are many plans available that fits everyone's budget and lifestyle. Right now, due to COVID-19, some companies are not requiring any medical exams to qualify. All right. So you can get in touch with Yolanda Spivey. Let her know you found out about this from the African History Network. She'll take care of you. Visit the website mwhitney.com, the letter M, Whitney.com, WHITNEY, mwhitney.com. You can also email her at life, LIFE, at mwhitney.com. Okay. And that's Yolanda Spivey. She also has the blackinsurancenetwork.com, blackinsurancenetwork.com. They have a lot of helpful articles dealing with insurance, wealth building, how you can use insurance as a financial tool as well. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. We'll be back from break in just a minute here. The film Hot P, you've heard me talk about the film Hot P, which deals with the role of economic development in African civilization. It's available right now at hotpfilm.com, hotpfilm.com. You can stream it in all digital formats or on DVD. Use the code HAPI, AHN, for a 10% discount, HAPI, AHN, for a 10% discount. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Sunday, September 13th, 2020, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We're broadcasting on...
we have a couple of callers if you want to go to them.
Okay. Just a second. We're broadcasting on social media platforms. We're broadcasting on a YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. And we're also broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network as well. And on 910 AM Superstation's Facebook fan page as well. Okay, so let's go to line one. Who we have on line one, JT?
Let's go to Chuck. Chuck, you're on there.
Hey, Chuck. Hey, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for calling. Tell us where you're calling from. Which city you're calling from, Chuck?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Hotep. I'm calling from Detroit.
From Detroit.
Michigan here.
Okay, go ahead with your question or comment.
Detroit. And my question is, wow, man, this subject can go forever. And it's real.
This is the short version, man. This is only a 2-hour show. I'm holding back.
Right. My question is what is the interpretation of slavery? There's so many different interpretations and so many dialects to the English language. It trips me out. So I figured call in and ask, how far does this slavery? Do you have to be a particular race of person or people to be considered minimum wage, or what would be neck to neck with what would be considered slavery? When it comes to definition.
You're talking about slave wages dealing with economics. You're talking about slave wages dealing with economics. You comparing that to the enslavement of African? Are you trying to show a comparison between that and the enslavement of African Americans in this country?
Well, my main point is African descendants the same as people of other ethnicities or ethnics or nationalities or cultures or traditions.
Are they the same as far as what? Are they the same as far as what? What do you mean?
I wouldn't say the same, but is it related to other nationalities and ethnics other than African Americans?
You're talking about to their conditions. So when we look at African Americans, let's do it like this for the sake of time, because I know we got other callers. For the sake of time, African Americans are very unique. We have a unique history. We've been stripped of our history, our language, our spiritual systems, our names, our culture, our identity, our nationality, our nationalities originally. We've been stripped of all that. Our history is entirely different than basically anybody else's history. Now, that does not mean that other people have not suffered oppression or have not suffered genocides. That doesn't mean that we don't learn about other people's oppression and genocides, et cetera. The people who come closest to what we went through in this country are Native Americans, but it's still a difference because they have largely, in general, been able to maintain at least their nationality. Now, there have been over 371 peace treaties that this country has violated. You have poverty on a lot of there are about 566 federally recognized tribal nations based upon the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA.gov. People can go to the website, BIA.gov, U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs. So when we deal with African Americans, we have to first really understand that history. And our history is totally different than anybody else. okay, from the start. So when we talk about our history, we have to understand it from that perspective. Okay. And the only ones that come closest to us probably are Native Americans, and and when you, not to get deep into this history, but we know that there were African people here before Native Americans even came into existence, like the Khoisan. Dr. David Imhotep deals with this in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, his book. I've interviewed him probably 14 times now. And we know that when European settlers come to this country, there are groups of Africans who are already here that get reclassified as Native Americans, because you have this whole group of people classified as Black Indians. Some of them were African people who were enslaved by Native American nations, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, things like this. Others were not enslaved and were already here and get reclassified as Black Indians. Okay. All right. Hey, I got to get these other calls, man. We run out of time. Thanks for calling, Chuck. Keep listening. Okay. All right. JT, who we have next? Line 2.
All right. So we can do Grace on line 3.
Great. Okay. Grace on line 3. Hey, Grace, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for calling. Tell us which city you're calling from.
I am a first-time caller, and it was absolutely refreshing to hear you speak. I didn't catch you from the beginning.
Okay.
But my ears were open. You seem to be very, very knowledgeable on what you speak about, and I'm definitely going to do some research because of things you spoke about. How can we get in touch with you? Because I need to, and I say need, to hear more of you. And if you are willing to be on a panel to speak to others, absolutely refreshing.
Oh, thanks.
To hear so much information. I do, and I need to hear more of you.
Yeah, sure. A couple things. One, you can email me, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Two, you can, if you want to listen to me, visit my web. We get some background noise there from you. You can visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. They have YouTube videos, Facebook videos, articles I've written, things like that. And you can follow me. We're broadcasting on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network right now, The African History Network, and on YouTube and on 910 AM Superstation Facebook fan page as well. So you can watch my videos there also. You still there, Grace? Okay, maybe we lost Grace, but email me, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Let me know more about your panel. I speak across the country. Now, I had a full schedule to speak out of state March through November until COVID-19 hit. No, that's gone. So, but I'm here Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, WFDF here in Detroit, the Future Radio. There's 4 years on this network. As of April 2020, is 4 years here on this network. Been doing radio 10 years. And we also broadcast on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and YouTube, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. Okay, any more callers, JT?
No, that's all for now.
Okay. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600. Maybe squeeze in one or two more calls here. And then we're going to continue after the top of the hour. We'll continue on my social media platforms as well. Also, check out this article here from September 10th, 2020, AtlantaBlackStar.com, AtlantaBlackStar.com. NFL accused of faking interest in signing Colin Kaepernick because of recent Black Lives Matter protests. We'll go back to the article about Mum Bet, Elizabeth Freeman, in just a minute here. But this was one I was looking for, one to pull up. NFL accused of faking interest in signing Colin Kaepernick because of recent Black Lives Matter protests. There was a report in June 2020 by NFL Network, the NFL Network, that said multiple NFL teams were interested in signing Colin Kaepernick since he has not played in the league since 2016. In that same month, League Commissioner Roger Goodell said that he supported NFL teams bringing Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback turned activist, onto their roster. But Pro Football Talk, The outlet Pro Football Talk says all of that was fake, and teams had no real interest in signing Colin Kaepernick. They were just reacting to the firestorm over George Floyd dying, being killed. Well, he ain't just up and die. No, he was killed. Okay. You put your knee on the neck of Olympic gold medalist swimmer for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, they're going to be dead too. Okay. So the firestorm over the killing of George Floyd, May 25th, 2020, while in police custody. Quote, per a source with knowledge of the situation, there was some quote unquote fake interest expressed immediately after George Floyd's death, seemingly out of guilt, end quote. Pro Football Talk writer Mike Florio, Florio, wrote in a September 7th, 2020 piece. Quote, there has been zero interest expressed as to Kaepernick in months, end quote. Now, you've heard me say just the previous segment. No teams have called Kaepernick for this new NFL COVID-19 season. No teams will call Kaepernick in for a tryout. Okay. So I saw the story when it ran back in June, and Roger Goodell said he supported teams calling Kaepernick in for a tryout. I knew that was BS then, because okay, all right, we're still on FCC regulated radio. Per a source with knowledge of the situation, there was some quote unquote fake interest expressed immediately after Floyd's death, seemingly out of guilt. There has been zero interest expressed as to Kaepernick in months, Pro Football Talk writer Mike Florio wrote in a September 7th, 2020 piece. Once Mike Florio tweeted his column, a debate broke out about whether Kaepernick is still capable of playing professionally, whether he really still wants to play, and if he's better off just being an activist. Okay. So you read the rest of this article here. Now, in this COVID-19 season, I'm not sure if Kaepernick wants to play in this COVID-19 season. I know he's better. I don't follow NFL more, but I know last season there was some scrubs that were hired as backup quarterbacks and third string, all this stuff. And I know Kaepernick was better than them. I haven't thrown a football in years. I throw better than some of them. So, I'm just saying. Okay. So check out this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com as well. Let's go quickly back to this article from history.com dealing with Elizabeth Freeman. Elizabeth Freeman, also known as Mum Bet, B-E-T-T. She lived in Massachusetts. She was an enslaved woman in Massachusetts. And Elizabeth Freeman was the first enslaved woman to sue for her freedom and win. Very quickly here. So Elizabeth Freeman marched by some accounts immediately to the house of Theodore Sedgwick, a prominent local lawyer, and demanded a dramatic account for the hypocrisy. She wanted to sue the state of Massachusetts for freedom. There were other cases. There weren't a whole lot, but there were other cases. I mean, we were doing anything we could to get free. Okay. It wasn't just the Underground Railroad. That wasn't founded until about 1830. Okay. There was an Underground Railroad going from Texas into Mexico before the Underground Railroad going north. There was one that about 5,000 to 10,000 enslaved Africans, and there were abolitionists who were helping them escape from Texas into Mexico because Mexico was free territory. So we were going all different ways. Florida wasn't U.S. territory till 1821. So those a lot of those Africans around in the area, Georgia, South Carolina, things like that, in the area around Florida, they were running into Florida. All right. And then so it wasn't just Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. No, by any means necessary. So Elizabeth Freeman said, I heard that paper read yesterday saying that. So this was the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780, stating that all men are born free and equal. OK. And she said, that ain't true. Was that the first time a black woman said talk to the hand? That she said that ain't true. Okay, so she said, I heard that paper read yesterday that says all men are born equal and that every man has a right to freedom. End quote, she said, "I am not a dumb critter, critter. Won't the law give me my freedom?" She said, "I was born tonight, but I wasn't born last night." Now, perhaps surprisingly, Theodore Sedgwick, a prominent local lawyer, agreed to represent this enslaved woman, Elizabeth Freeman. Her trial the following year, 1781, became what has been called, quote, the trial of the century, end quote, rocking not only Massachusetts, but the entire institution of slavery. Quote, "She was kind of the Rosa Parks of her time," end quote, said David Levinson, author, along with Emily Piper, of 1 Minute a Free Woman, 1 Minute a Free Woman, a book about Elizabeth Freeman. Okay. Massachusetts occupied an odd place in the history of slavery. It was the first colony to legalize the practice of slavery, and its residents were active in the slave trade. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. Contrary to popular belief, August 20th, 1619, when those 29 Africans were brought into Virginia on the White Line slave ship, codified slave laws didn't exist in any of the 13 British colonies. I'm not talking about the Spanish colonies, because we know the Spanish were taking Africans into South Carolina, the territory that today is basically South Carolina and Georgia. They were taking Africans into that area in 1526. We know that. You've heard me talk about that. 1619, codified slave laws don't exist in any of the British colonies, the 13 British colonies here that are going to become the United States. The first British colony to have codified slave laws was Massachusetts in 1641. They're going to be one of the first states to abolish slavery also. Okay. The second, and then at Virginia, codified slave laws come to the Virginia about 1660 or 1661. Those 29 Africans are put into a form of indentured servitude. They're released basically after 3 to 5 years. You read chapter 2 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. And I don't know where my copy is. I usually have it here. Did I move it? But here it is. Chapter 2 of I need to clean up. I got so many books and file folders all over the place. Chapter 2 of the 6th edition of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. goes through and breaks down his history. He even talks about some African people of African descent that came from England voluntarily and entered into indentured servitude to come to this country and then go on to, after 5 or 7 years, go on land and go on and own indentured servants themselves. Some indentured servants were African, some were white. So the way we think this history evolved is not how it happened. Then at the Philadelphia Convention, 1787, by 1787, 5 states had already abolished slavery. Whether they abolished it in full, Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery. It was July 2nd, 1777. It was 10 years before the Philadelphia Convention. 5 states had already abolished slavery by 1787, either fully or they had abolished the importation of Africans, or they were moving towards fully abolishing slavery, like Pennsylvania. About 1780, they have the Pennsylvania Gradual Abolition Act, things like this, right? So the whole way we think this history happened, it really ain't how it happened. Okay, I'm not saying slavery didn't happen. I'm not saying it wasn't horrible things. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when we really get in and study how this thing evolved, it's totally different than what many people think, many of us think. Okay, so read the rest of this article here for the sake of time. We have to move on. Meet Elizabeth Freeman, the first enslaved woman to sue for her freedom and win. This is at history.com, the official website of the History Channel. Okay. All right. Also, if you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me /the AHN Show, paypal.me /the AHN Show. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, finance our Sunday night show, etc. All right. Let's move on because I want to get this on 9:10 a.m. We've been talking about each week. I've gone through and broken down another plank of Joe Biden's 22-page agenda to empower Black America. Okay, what a lot of people call his Black agenda. We're going to do a part 4. You can go back and listen to the previous 3 weeks. Now, this came out May 2020. Okay. So when I hear people ask, even when I hear multimillionaire hip hop moguls ask what's in it for us, I'm like, you ain't read this? This came out May 2020. Now, I went through May and June 2020, and we dealt with we did 6 weeks of this show, broke it down, right? And we're going back through and dealing with 6 weeks again. Hold on just a second. We did 6 weeks of this show, broke it down. Okay. And then we're going back through and doing it all over again. Okay. So let's deal with part 4. Part 1, week 1, we dealt with the economic portion, economic empowerment for African Americans. And that was pages 2 through 11 for those who haven't read it. And you can go to joebiden.com and read it. This is not an endorsement. You can go to joebiden.com and read it. All right. But we deal with facts and evidence here. A lot of this, all this nonsense people are talking about. Democrats, Republicans don't want to deal with history, don't want to deal with policies, don't want to break this stuff down. Is, you have to listen to somebody else for that. We don't do that here. Read the article from blackpressusa.com, blackpressusa.com. This is from May 5th, 2020, Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. Now, I encourage you to compare this to Donald Trump's anti-Black agenda. Okay? Compare this to Donald Trump's anti-Black agenda. Right now, Donald Trump's Attorney General is in court to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act and kick 20 million people off of health care. Affordable Health Care Act gave 3 million non-elderly Black people health care who did not already have it. And the uninsured rate of African Americans dropped to its lowest point in history, dropped down to 10%. It's gone up now because a lot of us lost our health care even before coronavirus because of the attacks on it from the Trump administration. But if we look at this from the National Newspaper Association, Newswire, which is the association of Black newspapers, it's about 260 national Black newspapers. Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. This is from May 5th, 2020, written by Stacey M. Brown. It says, Biden said the plan reflects many months of work and feedback from local elected officials, activists, organizations, practitioners, policy experts, strategists, and young people. His campaign called the plan a living document, because over time they usually expand policy platforms, things like this. Okay. In a news release, the campaign noted that Joe Biden, quote, knows we need a comprehensive agenda for African Americans with an ambition that matches the scale of the challenge and with a recognition that race neutral policies are not a sufficient response to race-based disparities. Okay, now go read his entire policy platform, because I've read his entire policy platform, even going back to March. So you look at my March 17th broadcast, where we compared the policy platforms of the different Democratic candidates. Okay, and then I did one in April as well, all that. So I just started studying this stuff. Okay. The Biden plan for Black America is broken into 6 parts. 1, advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. We already did that. Expand access to high quality education and tackle racial inequity in our education system. We dealt with that too. Make far reaching investments in ending health disparities by race. And that ties, they talk specifically about coronavirus as well. As we talked about on last week's show, you read the article from the New York Amsterdam News. Coronavirus is now the 3rd leading cause of death of African Americans. Now, Donald Trump don't want to talk about that because he wants to keep playing down the severity of it. New York Amsterdam News, we dealt with this last week. COVID-19 now is the 3rd leading cause of death among Black people. Okay. So it's interesting how on February 7th, when Donald Trump was interviewed by Bob Woodward, who wrote the book Rage, Trump said it's a very tricky situation. It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. Trump knew February 7th, 2020, that coronavirus was transmitted through the air. But that's not what he said publicly. He downplayed the severity. He said he didn't want people to panic. He didn't want to scare people. Your whole campaign is based upon fear. Black people going to move into the suburbs, and there's going to be a low-income housing. Hide your children, hide your daughters. Black Lives Matter is going to come through your neighborhoods and burn your neighborhoods down. If Joe Biden becomes president, the stock market is going to crash. You're not going to have jobs. Well, 30 million people unemployed now. Your whole campaign is based upon fear. You didn't want to scare people? Really? Strengthen America's commitment to justice. Part 4, Part 5, make the right to vote and the right to equal protection real for African Americans. Part 6, address environmental justice. So today we'll deal with dealing with the right to vote. That is, what is that? Strengthen, let's see. Just a second here. Make the right to vote, the right to equal protection real for African Americans. Make the right to vote and the right to equal protection real for African Americans. Okay, so here's the Cliff Notes version of this. Donald Trump has rolled back civil rights enforcement across the government and cut staff for the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. When you go through and read this policy agenda, it shows you directly the relationship between policies, laws, and conditions. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, policies, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So when you read this, you see how all this plays out. And they have links here that you can click on to get more information for more supporting documentation. So Donald Trump has rolled back civil rights enforcement across the U.S. government and cut staff for the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. In the first 2 years of the Trump administration, the division started 60% fewer investigations. That's the Department of Justice, 60% fewer investigations than during the Obama-Biden administration. Okay. They've also basically stopped doing investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments. Because contrary to popular belief, Donald Trump don't give a damn about criminal justice reform. If he did, he wouldn't have accepted $600,000 in donations from Core Civic and Geo Group, which are two of the largest owner-operators of privatized prisons. That was in the 2016 campaign. If he cared about criminal justice reform, he wouldn't have reversed the Obama-Biden initiative from the policy change in August 2016. The Obama administration, the Department of Justice announced that they were not going to renew privatized prison contracts for federal prisoners because they can't control at the state level because of the 10th Amendment and states' rights, but they can control at the federal level. The day that came out, that's August 2016, the stock price of Core Civic and Geo Group took a big hit. Now, they were already losing money under the Obama administration because the U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point in 20 years in December 2015. You can read the article from Newsweek.com that talks about this, that cites the report from the Department of Justice that came out the following year, December 2016. Okay. So a lot of people don't deal with this type of information. I don't know why, but, you know, all right. So when we see Donald Trump's attorney generals, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, the first one who was against criminal justice reform, and his second one, William Barr, who's against criminal justice reform, how you talk about that you the champion of criminal justice reform when the attorney generals you nominated are against it? Attorney General William Barr just said recently that systemic racism doesn't exist in policing. He was nominated by Trump. So in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, the Department of Justice started, well, the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, I should say, the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice started 60% fewer investigations than the Obama-Biden administration. As President Joe Biden will reverse the damage done by Trump and increase funding for civil rights enforcement, He will ensure that the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, And the EEOC was actually created by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Go to blackpast.org, blackpast.org, PAST, and search for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and actually read it. Because a lot of us don't really understand the significance of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 or the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So Biden will ensure that the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, the EEOC, and agency civil rights enforcement offices have the resources they need to root out and stop discrimination. He will also ensure that political appointees, including the president's cabinet, look like the country they serve, and ensure that our federal workforce is representative of the demographics in our country. Next main bullet point. You read the details because I don't have time to get into this. Secondly, appoint U.S. Supreme Court justices and federal judges who look like America, are committed to the rule of law, understand the importance of individual civil rights and civil liberties in a democratic society, and respect foundational precedents like Brown versus Board of Education and Roe versus Wade. Now, Donald Trump has gotten approved a little over 200 federal judges. If he gets a second term, it'll be close to probably 500 federal judges. These are lifetime appointments. He's largely nominating very young, ultra conservative white males. Many of them are anti-civil rights. Many of them, some of the most unqualified people. Talk about affirmative action for white people. Oh my God. Some of these people are some of the most unqualified people being nominated. These are lists being submitted to him by the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Research the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society, two very right-wing conservative organizations that are pushing their agendas. All right. So a lot of this stuff happens and we don't understand this. In Moscow, Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, is helping Trump get these poorly qualified federal judges confirmed. And we know that Biden has committed to nominating a African-American woman to the U.S. Supreme Court as well. Okay. At the time this came out, May 2020, Trump has already appointed 193 federal judges, including 2 U.S. Supreme Court judges. Only 8 are African-American. Is now over 200. Okay, maybe about 207. 7 Trump appointees were rated not qualified by the American Bar Association. Now that's as of May 2020. I think is more now. Okay, we're going to continue this on my social media platforms: The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook, and on YouTube, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. We're out of time here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior is not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. All right, stand by, everybody. A disconnected call, JT. All right. Okay. So, all right, stand by. So we're on our social media platforms now. Should be. Let me disconnect this. We do 2 hours at 9:10 a.m. Superstation. Let me just make sure this call is disconnected. Okay. It should drop in a minute. All right. How's everybody doing? Okay, so we're in overtime here. Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. I'm on page 21. You can read this at joebiden.com. You can read the article from, we'll post a link to the article from Black Press USA. Black Press USA, Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. So appoint U.S. Supreme Court justices and federal judges who look like America. Next bullet point, the next major heading, ensure every vote counts. Ensure every vote counts. Since the Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder, an increasing number of states have passed laws with no apparent purpose besides making it more difficult to vote, especially for people of color. It's just as un-American now as it was during Jim Crow. As President Joe Biden will strengthen our democracy by guaranteeing that every American's vote is protected. He will start by passing the Voting Rights Advancement Act to update Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act and develop a new process for pre-clearing election changes. Section 4 was gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court cases Shelby County versus Holder 2014, which also affected Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Because that was gutted, and that dealt with the pre-clearance. Pre-clearance dealt with, the 1965 Voting Rights Act did not give African Americans the right to vote. What it did was protected the right to vote. It stated that states that had a history and territories that had a history of putting obstacles in the way of African Americans voting, like literacy tests and poll taxes, things like this, especially those former Confederate states, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. If they wanted to make any changes to the locations of polling places, to the hours that polling places are opened, to the number of weekends that you have souls to the poll voting on Sunday, anything like that. They want to make any changes, they had to get pre-clearance. They had to get permission from a federal judge. They couldn't just arbitrarily do it. Okay. When that ruling came out in 2013, within 24 hours, a lot of these states started coming out with new voter ID laws. In the 2016 presidential election, there were 868 fewer polling places nationwide, 868 fewer polling places nationwide, tied to this U.S. Supreme Court decision, Shelby County versus Holder, that, what's his name? Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III cheered. He cheered the decision. Now, Shelby County is in Alabama. Okay. Where was Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III? Where was he U.S. attorney? I'm not U.S. attorney. Where was he U.S. senator? Alabama. He's an old segregationist. And he cheered the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. Okay. So you have all these new voter ID laws, and then this impacted the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. The turnout of African Americans voting was the lowest in 20 years. A lot of people thought, oh, well, this is because they were apathetic of Hillary Clinton. That wasn't all of it. No. There was a 7 percentage point drop in the turnout. A lot of that had to do with voter suppression and the new voter ID laws, things like the interstate cross-checking system that was used in 23 states, basically with Republican state legislatures and Republican governors. The interstate cross-checking system championed by Chris Kobach, who is the Secretary of State in Kansas. And what the interstate cross-checking system did, and it was used here in Michigan, knocked something like 50,000 voters off the rolls in Michigan. What they said was that people were registered to vote in 2 states and people were voting twice. It targeted people with ethnic sounding names, not John Smith, but like Kwame Jackson. It targeted people with ethnic sounding names. It literally said, James Brown in Detroit, Michigan is the same James Brown in Cleveland, Ohio. So we're going to knock them off the voter rolls because they're voting twice. It knocked 1.1 million people off the voter rolls nationwide. AtlantaBlackStar.com has an article dealing with this, okay? And Google the interstate cross-checking system, 2016. So all this played, it wasn't just Russian interference and fake black profiles on social media. And some of them are still around making YouTube videos talking about not voting. It wasn't just that, it wasn't just the interstate it wasn't just the Internet Research Agency, the Russian Internet Research Agency, which is still at it again. And they took out 3,500 Facebook ads that reached about 126 million people. It wasn't just that. It was the rapid voter suppression and also the closing of polling places. a lot of those polling places were in African American and Hispanic, heavily populated cities, etc. So all this contributed into the results of 2016. We have to understand what happened so it don't happen again in 2020. The 59.6% of African Americans registered to vote in 2016 actually voted. 59.6%. That was 7 percentage point drop from 2012 when President Obama was on the ballot, when a record 66.6% of African Americans registered to vote actually voted. I'm trying to give you the Cliff Notes version because we got other topics to get to. Okay, I've done a whole presentation dealing with this stuff. We'll probably re-air my lecture that I did a lecture in 2017, African American Resistance in the Era of Donald Trump, Voter Suppression, Reparations, and How Elections Have Consequences. We'll probably air that. It's on DVD and digital download at my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, I did a presentation in February 2020 for African American History Month that dealt with, does an amendment guarantee the right to vote? Does an amendment guarantee the right to vote? Because 2020 is the sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary of the adoption of the 15th Amendment, February 3rd, 1870, February 3rd, 1870. So February 3rd, 2020 was the 150th anniversary. 15th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote to African American men. Didn't apply to African American women at the time. But nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it actually nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it explicitly give anyone the right to vote. Okay? So a lot of people don't know this, but Smithsonian Institute .com had an article dealing with this, which is Smithsonian Institute, their website. They had an article dealing with this. And there's some other articles that actually deal with the U.S. Constitution and how nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it explicitly give anyone the right to vote. The 15th Amendment guarantees the right to vote, but states have, because of the 10th Amendment, states have a lot of say so in who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote. Okay. Then the 19th Amendment, which guaranteed the right to vote to women, and the 26th Amendment of 1971, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18, and that was signed into law by President Nixon. The language of those two amendments was based upon the 15th Amendment, but still nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it actually guarantee the right to vote. Okay. So research that from Smithsonian. We'll try to post a link to it. Does an amendment give you the right to vote? I did a whole presentation dealing with this. 2012 presidential election. President Obama was reelected to the second term. There's always a white backlash when you have periods of time in African American advancement. There's always a white backlash. Trump was a backlash to 2 terms. President Barack Obama. He's a backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement, things like this. Holding police accountable. He's a backlash to all that. 2012, there was a record number of African Americans who voted. The percentage turnout. 66.6% of African Americans registered to vote voted in the 2012 presidential election. This was the first presidential election where the percentage of African Americans who voted was greater than the percentage of white people who voted. 2012 presidential election. This scared many white people to death, especially Republicans. They come back with 2013 with Shelby County versus Holder. This was a backlash to African American voter turnout in 2012, and there was a lot of voter suppression in 2012, but we overcame that. Many people don't understand the backlash of Shelby County versus Holder in 2013. Okay. So now today you have approximately 1,700 fewer polling places, which goes back to the 2013 U.S. Supreme Court case. So read this article here from americanhistory.si.edu, Smithsonian Institute. Does an amendment give you the right to vote? Does an amendment give you the right to vote? This is from February 3rd, 2020. In 2020, the 15th Amendment, the first voting rights amendment added to the U.S. Constitution, celebrates its 150th anniversary. You've likely heard, perhaps on the news or in the classroom, that the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gave or granted African-American men the right to vote. It's a turn of phrase that works as a shorthand. Unfortunately, it's also a bit misleading. Okay? As written, the 15th Amendment does not explicitly grant anyone the right to vote. Instead, it prohibits federal and state governments from placing restrictions on voting based on 3 criteria: race, color, and previous condition of servitude, meaning if your grandfather was a slave. That's like grandfather laws. So like around 1898 grandfather clause, if your grandfather couldn't vote because he was a slave, then you can't vote. So read this article here. It goes into it in the U.S. Constitution, okay, which once again is the foundational law in this country. And Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution clearly states that the U.S. Constitution, all of the previous treaties, and all the subsequent treaties are the supreme law of the land. So we understand history and we understand law. That's why this is important. If you don't understand history, don't understand law, you don't understand the moves being made in Congress, the legal moves being made. Okay, so read that article here. Let me zip through this for the sake of time. So all this ties into Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America and voting rights protection. And this ties into the section dealing with ensure every vote counts. But a lot of people don't understand this background history to understand why this is necessary, why this matters. Since the Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder, an increasing number of states have passed laws with no apparent purpose besides making it more difficult to vote, especially for people of color. It's just as un-American as it was during Jim Crow, as President Joe Biden will strengthen our democracy by guaranteeing that every American's vote is protected. He will start by passing the Voting Rights Advancement to update Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act and develop a new process for pre-clearing election changes. Pre-clearing deals with getting permission from a federal judge. Pre-clearing election changes. Now, U.S. House of Representatives, led by Democrats, passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. It's stuck in the U.S. Senate right now. It's on Moscow Mitch McConnell's desk. It's stuck in the Senate. He's not taking it up because no bill can come to the U.S. Senate floor for debate or a vote without his permission, including reparations. And he's already said reparations is dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate. So I hear a lot of people talk about reparations. Somehow it seems like they're under the impression that the president signs an executive order to give reparations. No, it has to read Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. It has to pass through both chambers of the legislative branch of government, the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Mitch McConnell already said it's dead on arrival. It ain't even up for debate in the Senate, which means it won't have a vote. Then the other thing that I'm waiting on people to explain to me, nobody's been able to explain to me this: how do you get around the unanimous consent rule in the U.S. Senate? Because Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee blocked 3 election integrity bills in the U.S. Senate to protect the integrity of U.S. elections through unanimous consent. She objected, so they blocked the bill. We saw that I think it was the anti-lynching, was it the anti-lynching bill? Senator Rand Paul, jackass from Kentucky, blocked that bill through unanimous consent. So nobody's been able to tell me how the hell you get a reparations bill through the U.S. Senate when Republicans can block it with unanimous consent. I'm still waiting on somebody to answer that question for me. Then you're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. So even if Democrats take back control of the Senate, which they should, and say it's 53-47, because now it's 53-47 Republicans. So say it flips and it's 53-47 Democrats, right? Well, 60 minus 53 is 7. So you're going to need 7 Republicans to vote for it. Well, the Black Tea Party Republican, the only Black Republican in the U.S. Senate, Senator Tim Scott, he already said he's not voting for reparations. So the Black Republican is not going to vote for reparations. How many white Republicans you think realistically going to vote for it? See, these are questions people don't want to ask. So what I focus on is like, look, how do we get this bill passed through the House, get out of committee in the House, go to the House floor, get passed, get Senate, get passed, get signed into law by president. Now, Trump already said he's against reparations. It ain't gonna happen with him. Joe Biden supports H.R. 40. He talks about it in, we'll get to that in just a minute. Page 22. Page 22. He supports H.R. 40. This is the first time that I know of, probably in 50, 60 years, that you have a presidential candidate who has accepted the nomination. Who's accepted the nomination, who actually supports reparations in any form for African Americans. If you know of one, let me know. I don't know of one. He will also ensure that the Justice Department challenges state law suppressing the right to vote. Biden supports automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, and many more steps to making exercising one's right to vote easier. Because we know Trump ain't trying to make it easier for people to vote. He's dismantling, he through LaJoy, his henchman LaJoy, they're dismantling the U.S. Postal Service that employs 630,000 people. See, 633,000 people, 21% of African American. The real goal is to privatize the Postal Service. Many Republicans have been wanting to do that for like the past 25 years. Break it up into parts and privatize it. And Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin is one of the ones leading that fight. Biden will ensure that the Justice Department has the resources and authority to enforce laws that protect our rights. Biden believes we need to end gerrymandering, and we must protect our voting booths and voter rolls from foreign powers that seek to undermine our democracy and interfere in our elections. Trump don't want to even deal with it. Microsoft just came out and talked about how Russia, China, and Iran, some type of interference that they're involved in. But we know Russia is at the forefront. Okay. Trump don't even want to deal with this. And the Biden administration will incentivize states to automatically restore voting rights for individuals convicted of felonies once they have served their sentences. Next heading. Combat the epidemic of violence against transgender women of color. Combat the epidemic of violence against transgender women of color. Okay. Then you can read the details on that. Then tackle systemic racism and support a study of the continuing impacts of slavery. Okay. Now this is in here. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of these people putting out YouTube videos ain't talking about this. I don't know why. Tackle, page 22, tackle systemic racism and support a study of the continuing impacts of slavery. Now, Trump don't even want to acknowledge systemic racism exists. We must acknowledge that there can be no realization of the American dream without grappling with the original sin of slavery and the centuries-long campaign of violence, fear, and trauma wrought upon African Americans in this country. As Biden has said in this campaign, a Biden administration will support a study of reparations. Biden will begin on day one of his administration to address the systemic racism that persists across our institutions today. A lot of that ties into part one that dealt with economic empowerment. We dealt with that 4 weeks ago. Okay, that's pages 2 through 11. Deals with eliminating redlining. These are all different types of things obstacles to African Americans obtaining wealth, et cetera. It deals with increasing home ownership rates, et cetera. So go back and read that. That's pages 2 through 11. We dealt with that 4 weeks ago. Okay, so that's why he developed education, climate change, and healthcare policies, among others, that will root out this systemic racism and ensure that all Americans have a fair shot at living the American dream. Okay, so that's dealing with, that section is dealing with make the right to vote and the right to equal protection real for African Americans. Okay, you can read the entire policy platform at joebiden.com. Read Donald Trump's anti-Black agenda. Also read his as well. Okay, I'm not saying don't read his. Then go read the 92-page policy platform that Democrats voted on and released at their convention they just had. Okay, and then go read the policy platform that Republicans released in 2020. Oh, I forgot, they didn't release one in 2020. They're using the one from 2016. They didn't vote on one in 2020. The one on 2020 is get Trump reelected to a second term. That's their agenda. That's their policy platform. They didn't release a new one. They didn't vote on one, and they didn't debate one at their convention. They didn't do that. They're using one from 2016. Okay, how'd that work out for you? All right. So check that out. Read the article from blackpressusa.com. Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. All right, let's move on. Let's see here. Can we go to Bob Woodward? Let's do this. We're here. How's everybody doing on YouTube, Facebook? Let's see. Let's look at the book from Bob Woodward. Okay, the book from Bob Woodward. Excerpts have been released of that book. Is called Rage, and they talked about it on AM Joanne Reid. Washington Post has a good article dealing with it. Everybody, I mean, this shook up the internet when this story dropped. And it was revealed that Donald Trump knew about the severity and the deadly, how deadly coronavirus was. And he was downplaying it in public. He knew about this in February, January, but even going back in February and March, but even going back to January. So if we look at the article from Washington Post, Woodward book, Trump says he knew coronavirus was deadly and worse than the flu while intentionally misleading Americans. Trump says he knew coronavirus was deadly and worse than the flu while intentionally misleading Americans. All right. So let me see if we can go. Let's try to pull up this. They talked about this on AM Joanne Reid. And we're going to see if we can pull this up because one laptop is freezing up. My backup laptop. I'm running off of 2 laptops. The backup one is freezing up. I need to get a better laptop. Let's try to pull up this clip here. So Joanne Reid talked about this on September 9th, dealing with Donald Trump downplaying the severity of coronavirus. Okay, we'll cue this clip up here. Just a second. All right, hold on. We'll cue this clip up. All right, so we'll wait for that to queue up. I want you to hear this. So Matthew Pottinger, the Deputy National Security Advisor, agreed. He told Donald Trump that after reaching contacts in China, it was evident that the world faced a health emergency on par with the flu pandemic of 1918, which killed an estimated 50 million people worldwide. Okay. 10 days later, Donald Trump called Bob Woodward and revealed that he thought the situation was far more dire than what he had been saying publicly. Okay. Let's go to this clip from the readout, Joanne Reid on MSNBC. Just a second here. Let's get this going. Hold on. I'm not sure why this isn't playing. What the hell? Come on. All right, we'll try to pull this up another way. I didn't get a chance to play this on 9/10. So we'll try to pull this up another way. Just a second here. Let me try to go in. Get this another way. All right. So if we look at the article from the Washington Post, and then there were two from the Washington Post. The first one I talked about, and then also the second one, 5 Takeaways from Rage. 5 Takeaways from Rage, Bob Woodward's new book about Trump. So Trump said, "You just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed." Trump said in a February 7th call, "You just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed." And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than even your strenuous flu. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flu. Now, this is a February 7th, 2020 call with Bob Woodward, where he said this. Bob Woodward recorded this, okay, with Trump's permission. He did 18 interviews with Trump over the course of about 9 hours, and most of them were recorded. Trump said, "This is deadly stuff." Okay. He said, "This is deadly stuff." Let's try to pull this up here. Okay. Now, Trump admitted to Bob Woodward on March 19th that he deliberately minimized the danger of coronavirus. He said, quote, "I wanted to always play it down. I wanted to always play it down." The president said, "I still like playing it down because I don't want to create a panic. I still like playing it down because I don't want to create a panic." So basically you're lying to people, and you've had over 193,000 people who have died, okay, because you're lying to them and you're downplaying the severity of it. He just held a rally in, I think it was Nevada, on Sunday, and the people are there with no masks. The majority of the people are there with no masks on. All right. So this is what Trump is doing. All right, let's see. Let's try to pull this clip up. Everybody on our social media platform, share this broadcast. Also invite your friends to tune in as well. Okay, so aside from exploring Trump's handling of the pandemic, Bob Woodward's new book, Rage, covers race relations, diplomacy with North Korea, and a variety of other issues that have arisen during the past 2 years. Okay, we'll get this queued up here.
Supporters, I know, you don't want to hear this from me. But if you can stand it, just take a minute to listen, please. Your president, the man to whom you have given your absolute devotion over the last 4 years, lied to you. In fact, Trump has been lying to all of us for practically this entire year about this virus that has killed nearly 200,000 of us, and it's still killing Americans. He lied, and a lot of people died. Now, many of us who closely followed Trump's campaign and have taken a deep look at his history have figured out long ago that Trump was a liar and a fraud. We don't believe the stuff he says. If he tells us it's raining, we triple check before grabbing an umbrella. But you hang on to his every word. So let's just be clear. It was you that he lied to. And he didn't just lie. He acted on that lie. He's had you out there at his rallies without masks. He's had you demanding that kids go back to school, play high school and college football, when he knew since January that coronavirus could, and in nearly 200,000 cases, has killed people. Oh, and there are tapes. Not tapes of anonymous sources or disgruntled former staffers. Nope, tapes of Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump not only knew that he was lying about the virus, he bragged about it in a series of interviews with Washington Post journalist Bob Woodward. According to the Washington Post report,
can you all hear?
New book, Rage, Trump was warned on January 28th by National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, quote, "This will be the biggest national security threat you face in your presidency." And 10 days later, Trump called Bob Woodward on February 7th and admitted it.
It's a very tricky situation. It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
Oh, really? Well, and then over the next several weeks, Trump argued exactly the opposite, that coronavirus wasn't worse than the flu. Oh, no way. All that risk talk was just another Democrat hoax. He minimized how dangerous this global pandemic would be in America.
But we have it so well under control. I mean, we really have done a very good job. It's a little like the regular flu that we have flu shots for. And we'll essentially have a flu shot for this in a fairly quick manner. This is a flu. This is like a flu. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. Almost everybody that we see is getting better. And it could be everybody, too. So calm. You have to be calm. It'll go away. And we're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it. And it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. But everybody has to be vigilant and has to be careful. But be calm.
He knew that wasn't true. And then later in March, Trump spoke to Woodward again and said the one true thing that he's managed to spit out about the virus in 9 months, that he was deliberately playing it down, that he deliberately minimized the dangers of COVID.
Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob, but just today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. It's not just old.
Yeah. This is March 19th.
Plenty of young people.
You went through a pivot on this to, oh my God, the gravity is almost inexplicable and unexplainable.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
Wanted to. I don't want to create a panic.
Wow. Now, of course, I must know what came or after each of these recordings. And of course, today did the usual and called the book a political hit job, saying he didn't want to create panic. But to reiterate, under that quote unquote leadership. People's lives have been ruined all over this country. Many of them, people who voted for Donald Trump. More than 191,000 Americans are dead due to the virus. More than 6.3 million Americans have been infected, and more than 13 million Americans are unemployed. 8 months after he knew this virus was airborne and could kill a lot of people, Trump is still actively gathering rallies. And let's just be clear, these are solely for his own need to feel adulation. And he's putting his own superfans' lives at risk, including at the White House. Honestly, why would anyone do that? Why would any president? And why should anyone believe anything that he says now?
Okay, so that was hopefully you could hear that. That was from Joanne. That was the readout from Joanne MSNBC, September 9th, 2020. Naming that clip, Joy Reid on Trump downplaying coronavirus dangers. Your president lied to you. Your president lied to you. Let me see this play now. And there was another clip that I wanted to get to. This was with Trump on